people who control the governments are the same people that control the banks. And so laws have been passed to suit the banks. The worst nightmare of the banking system is interest-free money.
It's interesting when you look at life and people in general that we don't tend to ask big questions. We tend to just focus on the little questions. So we'll ask about how much money this costs or how much money I'm earning and all the rest of it. But we don't ask the big question, which is, what is money? And if we don't know what money is, then we can't understand how we're manipulated through the money system and how what we call banking is legalized theft. And because, of course, it doesn't mean it's lawful, if you like. It doesn't mean it's right or just. It just means it operates within the laws that those that control the banking system and at the same time control the political system have passed to allow banks to be legalized, corrupt robbers of the people. And they do it like this. And to understand this banking crisis, we've really got to understand, first of all, what money is. When you go into a bank and you ask for a loan on a house or car or whatever, what did the bank do? I mean, what was the process? Again, we don't seem to ask those questions. Oh, well, they lend us money. Well, okay. Well, where do they get it from?
Money doesn't really exist. It's a theory. If you look at how the world's been acquired, it's been done by a banking scam where you lend people money that doesn't exist. We call it credit. And you charge them interest on it. And if they don't pay the money back plus interest, then you get their wealth that does exist. You get their home, their business, their land, their resources, whatever. And we've been through a process of banks lending credit, figures on a screen, greatly in excess of what they have as assets, called fractional reserve lending. And when they can't pay it back, because often the banks have taken actions that have crashed the economy, like in 2008, the banks then get all the things they've lent money on, the real wealth of the world. And what's happened in this process of lending credit, getting the real resources when they can't pay back the credit, has sucked the wealth of the world, the real wealth of the world, into the hands of a very, very few people, and left out there most of the rest of the population with something called money. And money only buys anything because we take it seriously. You know, if it's just a piece of paper, and this is the point, it's meant not even to be a piece of paper, it's meant to be purely electronic. So we have this fresh air money that is worth something because the buyer and the seller believe in it, and only because of that. And the real wealth of the world has been sucked into the hands of a very few people by lending this scam called credit. Another interesting thing about this money situation is when you go to a bank and you say, borrow £50,000, they'll type into your account £50,000 in credit. Where's the credit come from? But you're not paying back £50,000. You're paying back £50,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal. Because people think that governments create money. Money is overwhelmingly created by private banks issuing credit. That's how so-called money comes into circulation. What this means is creating credit for the principal but not the interest, is that at no point is there ever enough money, credit or otherwise, in circulation to pay back all the debt and all the interest on the debt outstanding. So people losing their homes and their businesses and their resources, etc., is built into the system on purpose.
Do we need taxation? People say, oh yeah, of course, because that's the mentality. Oh, taxation, pay for everything. Why are governments all over the world borrowing money from private banks? They're the bloody government. Why aren't they creating their own currency interest-free and circulating it interest-free within the population? Why aren't they creating money in this way which is what the banks are doing, except the banks are charging interest as well and paying for public projects. Why do they have to borrow money at interest, taxpayer interest, from private corporations and banks and other institutions to pay for these projects? Why aren't they creating their own money interest-free and paying for them that way? Because the people who control the governments are the same people that control the banks.
What has happened, because the same network of families that I've been exposing all this time have controlled, indeed created the banking system as we know it, have also controlled the politicians that pass legislation about banking laws and finance. Laws have been passed to create something called fractional reserve lending. It sounds a boring title and all the rest of it, but we really need to understand what this means. Fractional reserve lending allows banks to lend at least, and it is at least, 10 times what they actually have on deposit. It's called credit. You know, people say, there's a credit crunch. What does that mean? It means that loans of, in effect, non-existent money are not being made on the scale they were before. But I'll come to that in a second. You go into a bank and you put $1 in a bank, say. That bank can now lend 9-10 times that dollar because the law says you only have to have something like 10% of your theoretical money that bank has on deposit. All the rest you can loan out. So you go into a bank and you borrow $50,000, say. Now, what the bank has done to create that is type into your account $50,000. It's not there. It's called credit, $50,000. From that moment, you start paying interest on $50,000 to that bank that has been created simply by someone at the bank typing $50,000 into your account. Staggering, but true. They've not moved precious metal anywhere. They've not moved real money into your account, but the theoretical figures on a screen money that they create out of thin air. But it gets better or worse. I then take $50,000, a check of that money, and I buy a car. The person I buy the car to takes the $20,000 and he puts it in his bank. Now his bank, Bank B, can lend 10 times on that $20,000, which at Bank A has been created out of thin air. Then he signs a check to someone else or buys something else, and then the person they buy it from, they put their money in their bank, which is Bank C. Say he bought something for $5,000. Bank C can now lend 10 times the $5,000, which has come from that bank being able to lend on the $20,000, which goes back originally to Bank A, where the money was created out of nothing. Now, when you follow this round, and some people have done the maths, one loan to one person of fresh air, out of nowhere money, credit, when it's traveled around the banks and gone from person to person, the interest the banking system as a whole gets from that original one fresh air loan is stupendous.